Hey guys, how are you all beautiful people? Hope all of you are doing fine. And yes, this is next part of Godlike Hokage in Naruto. The Gura Gura no Mi is known as the strongest fruit in the world of One Piece. In Naruto world, the blood limit would grant the strongest power for those ninjas. But what if the Gura Gura no Mi is found in the world of Naruto and after it is eaten it will be like a blood limit power? Well, the MC just took that fruit. This story begins before the Second Ninja War by 2 years. So let's start without any delay. The Allied Shinobi Army. The headquarters. Perceiving the crazy chakra from the water ball, the perceptual ninjas sitting around all had a dull expression. Report. Above the battlefield between Madara and the 5 Kage, there is a huge meteorite falling. Hearing the report, Tsunade, who had been sitting there, finally couldn't stay still. She stood up and said, "What did you say?" The ninja who reported to her stood there shocked, while cold sweat was covering his forehead. Seeing his appearance, Tsunade gritted her teeth and immediately thought that this must be some kind of ninjutsu performed by Madara. Although the 5 Kage were all there, it was estimated that the chance of winning was not too high. "I'm joining too," Tsunade said in a deep voice after taking a deep breath. She was ready to help the 5 Kage and fight Madara. However, just when her voice fell, a voice emitted with a slight chuckle. "Sister Tsunade, don't worry. Just keep drinking your tea." The sound came from the water ball's direction. Next to it, Naito was standing there, a smirk on his face. It seems that it is almost time for him to play. Naito. Seeing Naito appearing, Tsunade finally felt relieved and smiled. Since he's here, she doesn't need to worry about anything. The colossal meteorite that almost obscured the sky was falling on the ground, with an almost irresistible force. At this time, the 5 Kage finally reacted. Now is not the time to give up. You can't just accept your fate without doing anything about it. Oniki and Kakashi were the quickest to react, and with a shout, Oniki helped the others regain their focus and fighting spirit. On the other hand, Kakashi calmly commanded the ninjas of the allied Shinobi forces to run away as far as they could. After that, the 5 Kage stood together, raising their head up to the sky, with no fear or confusion in their eyes. After each took a deep breath, they had no choice but to use their strongest ninjutsu. Wind release, the dance of sand blade edge. Water release, water dragon bullet. The wind and water merged together, creating a storm. The power was on another different level. After all, these people represented the 5 Kage, the 5 strongest shinobi in the world. And they weren't thinking about blocking the meteorite, but smashing it. However, the storm hit the surface, but the meteorite and only slowed him down a little, then it continued its way toward the ground. At this time, Oniki flew to the sky, then tried to stop it using the super lightweight rock technique. The Raikage was the fastest among all of the other Kage, so he didn't use any ninjutsu, but directly rushed to the sky and fiercely bombarded the giant meteorite with a fist wrapped in thunder. The 4 Kage joined forces to attack. Although this meteorite was giant, it was just an ordinary meteorite. After all, it wasn't created from stealing, and finally, some crack appeared on its surface. Kakashi then grabbed his white light chakra saber, stared at the meteorite in the sky, then finally rushed into the sky at the last moment. Whoosh! Kakashi didn't use any unique technique, it was only his kenjutsu style, combined with chakra flow. But it was the most perfect kind of chakra flow. With one cut, dense cracks finally appeared on the huge meteorite. Okay. One last. The 5 Kage had already used all of their attacks, so the final blow was an attack jointly released by the 5. Boom! The meteorite that was enough to cover the sky was finally destroyed. Good. We did it. After Oniki and the others smashed the meteorite, they all looked excited. Uchiha Madara isn't invincible after all. With their power combined, they were still very hopeful of defeating him. Uchiha Madara has been standing there quietly watching the whole time, while the 5 Kage were desperately attacking that one meteorite. They're really ignorant kids. That's what he thought as he was looking at the sky, smirking. Watching the 5 so excited, Madara finally looked at them and spoke faintly, saying, "Very good, but what are you gonna do about the other 9? Hearing Madara's words, the expression on their faces stiffened, and they couldn't believe what they just heard. Still, they subconsciously looked up at the sky. Whoosh! Under the sky, another meteorite of the same size as before appeared on the top of their heads. Moreover, what is even more terrifying is that because this meteorite has just fallen from the cloud, they could clearly see the other 8 identical meteorites above that one, and all 9 were connected in a line. Damn it! This was too much to handle that all of the ninjas were shocked. And the 5 Kage present were almost motionless, and they finally understood the kind of gap between them and Uchiha Madara. They're clearly not on the same level at all. This is no longer a thing they can solve. And even if they try, the 5 Kage will never be able to defeat Madara. Back then, when he was alive, he could actually defeat all of the 4 Kage combined too, but he couldn't do that because of one man, Senju Hashirama. Uchiha Madara wanted to crush the entire Shinobi world with his own power, but he couldn't. But now, Hashirama is no longer here, and the so-called 5 Kage and the so-called allied Shinobi forces are too weak. Now he can finally rule the world. 9 meteorites joined in a line and fell from the sky magnificently, but it looked like he had dropped a few stones for Uchiha Madara. However, these meteorites weren't targeting the 5 Kage directly. In fact, the 5 Kages were just on the edge of its zone. The 9 meteorites falling from the sky were targeting the entire allied Shinobi forces. These 9 meteorites were still very high in the sky. With the Kage's speed, of course, they can easily escape that attack range, but for these allied Shinobi forces running is not an option, and just in 10, none will remain. Damn, damn. This time, even the irritable Rage couldn't help but curse with a trembling voice. Oniki looked at the sky, while sweat dripped off his face. He didn't say a word, or you can say he couldn't speak even if he wanted. Mai's body was also trembling slightly, and her bright eyes were full of fear. There is no way to stop it, no one can stop it. And just when the 5 Kage were desperate, a faint voice suddenly emitted out of nowhere, spreading clear throughout the field. Okay, Uchiha Madara, enough of bullying children. As soon as his sound fell, a light suddenly flashed in the sky, then an illusory figure emerged, and then slowly solidified. The moment his figure appeared, Uchiha Madara's complexion finally changed, and he became solemn. Is he finally here? Upon seeing that figure, the 5 Kage below finally could breathe out, feeling as if they had already escaped hell. It was Naito who appeared on the battlefield. Seeing that Naito finally appeared on the stage, Oniki and the others were relieved, but they also felt a bit bitter. Before, they thought they could stop Uchiha Madara, but Uchiha Madara was completely playing games with them. However, even though Naito finally appeared, the 9 meteorites were still covering the sky. Although it was initially 10, one of them were crushed by them after joining their forces, but still, this was enough to end the entire allied Shinobi forces. This kind of power, I'm afraid that even Naito won't easily block it. Moreover, with so many meteorites, even if Naito can smash them all one by one, then fallen rocks are enough to completely bury this area, and the Shinobi allied forces will still suffer heavy casualties. However, even if they are worried, the 5 Kage can't do anything. They all know their limits, they can't help Naito. They could only stand and watch, hoping that Naito, the god of the Shinobi world, can really block these 9 meteorites. This isn't bullying kids. Since you bear Kage's name, you should have the strength to defend it. Otherwise, it's just a joke. Uchiha Madara stood there, looking at Naito standing in the air, and finally spoke lightly. However, since you're here, and want to protect these little ghosts, please be my guest. As he said, Uchiha Madara didn't make any movement but gestured slightly at the 9 meteorites in the sky. Although he didn't want to be resurrected this way, having unlimited chakra and an immortal body wasn't that bad. The last time he lost to Naito, so he was feeling slightly upset. Hearing Madara's words, Naito suddenly smiled. Since I've said it was just a trick to bully kids, I can't treat it seriously now. Naito clenched his fist with a smirk, and without even lifting his head, he lightly punched the void above him. Hum! With a punch, the world was turned upside down. It looked so random, so weak, but the moment it fell, a huge force burst out, and the bright white light emitted into the sky, covering it and the 9 meteorites. Hum! The white beam of light that penetrated the sky bombarded the first meteorite that was as big as the 5 Kage, destroyed and shattered it almost instantly. Moreover, this white light seemed like an enhanced version of the dust release. The moment it bombarded it, the meteorite was shattered silently, then disappeared without leaving a trace. But it didn't stop there with the first meteorite, and immediately rushed to the second, without dropping any speed. Immediately afterward, the third, the fourth. Hum! 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 With a continuous buzzing, the moment when all the 9 meteorites were wiped out, the white beam of light seemed to have pierced the sky. What a shocking scene this is! Almost all the allied Shinobi forces were looking at the sky, feeling that their minds were blank. It was indeed a scene that only can be seen in dreams. Not only these Shinobi in this area, but every Shinobi in the other battlefield stopped to look at the beam of light blasting into the endless starry sky. No one could remain calm under this kind of shock, and even the 5 Kage looked too shocked. Since Uchiha Madara shocked them before, none what words they could use to describe what they felt when they saw what Naito has just done. At this moment, even Uchiha Madara looked shocked. He didn't expect Naito to possess such power, which was far stronger than the last time. Not only this battlefield but even the entire Shinobi world, all the civilians, even if they couldn't see the 9 meteorites, they saw the beam of light penetrating the sky and blasting into the endless starry sky. A distortion appeared on the headquarters perceptual water ball, then it abruptly stretched and trembled violently. In the end, the water ball burst apart, and the water splashed on the entire building command and the ninjas within it. Everyone was stunned. What happened? Tsunade ignored the water stains on her clothes and suddenly stood up. Narashikaku's expression changed, watching this scene as if he was thinking of something, but he couldn't get himself to say a word. With a stunned expression, he looked out the window. And as expected, he saw far away, in the battlefield's direction, a beam of light piercing the sky. Sitting on the side, Yamanaka Inoichi, who was in charged communication, looked stunned, motionless, the expression on his face frozen, and he didn't say a word. The perceptual ninjas, who sit in the circle around the water ball, looked shocked. Unbelievable. What is going on? Tsunade was as stunned as everyone there, and couldn't help but slam the table fiercely, and finally, everyone came back to their sense with a bang. The perceptual ninjas looked at her, then looked at each other, and finally, one of them took a deep breath, barely restraining the shock in his heart, and reported back to Tsunade. It seems that Uchiha Madara has summoned many meteorites from the sky and targeted the entire battlefield. However, these meteorites were instantly destroyed by another force. After it destroyed the meteorites and rushed to the sky, the force was too large for the sensory water ball to percept, and it got exploded. Reluctantly maintaining his composure, he reported to Tsunade, but the shock was still evident on his face. Having been a perceptual ninja for a lifetime, he has never encountered such a situation. Madara's power already made them feel terrified. It was already horrifying that it shook the water ball. But Naito's power directly exceeded the limit of the water ball, causing it to explode. Until now, he's still in a trance. He has perceived and sensed countless information materials in his lifetime, and even though he sensed everything happened just now, he still couldn't understand Naito's power. Not only him, but Naruto on the side also didn't understand. He figured out that what exploded the water ball is Naito's power, but he couldn't understand Naito's power even with his high IQ. This is no longer within the range of his understanding, and it has nothing to do with IQ. The white beam kept rushing toward the starry sky until it gradually dissipated, and Naito loosened his fist and put it down. The meteorites were completely destroyed, and no fragments fell to the ground. Only a little dust fell from the sky at the ninjas below. I feel like this is no longer a place for us to stay. Horrifying. Some people trembled, and others swallowed. Oniki and the other Kage looked at Naito and Madara. After slowly calming down, the five of them silently fell back, leading the allied Shinobi army to retreat together. Madara's expression was extremely solemn while looking at Naito. If he wasn't summoned by the Edo Tensei and had a normal body, perhaps a trace of sweat would have been overflown on his forehead. After taking a deep breath, Madara's eyes looked sharp. Naito didn't fear anyone, and so he is. He was just shocked by Naito's strength, but he will never be afraid. On the contrary, seeing Naito's terrifying strength, Madara's heart surged with excitement and a strong will to fight. Sure enough, only you are qualified to be my opponent. Accompanied by the excitement, chakra surged out of Madara's body and instantly transformed into Susanu's second form, suddenly becoming bigger, turning into the third form, and finally, under countless shocked gazes, it was a complete Susanu. Oniki and the others looked at this scene in the distance, and they felt their throats becoming dry. Unexpectedly, that thing has several forms. This technique is even more terrifying than the previous meteorites. Oniki and the others knew in their hearts that this form of the Susanu could easily destroy the previous meteorites with that kind of chakra. No matter how big the meteorite is, it doesn't contain a lot of chakra, so it can be easily smashed. However, facing this Susanu, I'm afraid that everything else is helpless except for Oniki's dust. Even if Oniki's dust release can work, the size of the complete Susanu is too big. So big that using his dust release does not make any sense even if he puts all of his chakra in it. Sure enough, has he been playing with us just now? Mai also used the word play with a bitter tone. It seems that Madara has only become serious facing Naito. It's just. Naito doesn't seem as serious as Madara. In fact, he looks like the latter when he was fighting against them. The complete Susanu, I have seen it before, there's nothing new. Naito shrugged and treated Madara the same way he was treating the 5 Kage. In fact, he seemed even more relaxed. After hearing Naito's words, Madara's eye twitched, then he coldly snorted and said, "It's not over yet." Hum. A strong natural energy surged from Madara's body and quickly flowed into the Susanoo, making it look brighter and the aura around it more magnificent. At that moment, it looked like a god standing on earth. Zetsu prepared a unique Edo Tensei body just for Madara. He transplanted it with a lot of Hashirama's cells and even added other extraordinary things. There are some things that Zetsu took when he manipulated Obito to invade Konoha. Most of them were some research results of the second Hokage. Uchiha Madara's body contains more Hashirama cells than in the original, so now he can even control natural energy on his own, and has also awakened his sage body. Oh, so you have a sage body now. Natural energy is also integrated inside the Susanoo. It's a little, but it can be counted as new. Naito decided to play with Madara, but he still ridiculed him. Naito's attitude naturally made Madara very upset because this how he behaved while dealing with the 5 Kage, so after a cold snort, Madara controlled the Susanoo, which was fused with natural energy, and drew his sword suddenly at Naito. Whoosh! The blue energy lightsaber was unleashed, its shape edge seemed to be able to tear the sky. Everyone looked like they were inside a genjutsu and imagined how their body is cut into 2 parts by this sword. Looking at the sword sweeping and feeling its sharpness, the allied Shinobi forces retreated even far away, including the 5 Kage, showing horrified expressions. But more shocking scenes are still to come. Hum. Before it reached Naito's body, the sword suddenly caused the air to tear apart, causing the surrounding ground to shatter. However, when the sword came to Naito, the latter raised a finger, casually moved it toward the lightsaber, and blocked it. His finger, compared to the lightsaber, was so small, yet unshakable like a mountain. The lightsaber was bursting out with energy, the aura surrounding it gave the feeling that it can split the earth. But such a terrifying sword couldn't make Naito's finger even move an inch. Everyone was stunned. This wasn't as good as wiping out 9 meteorites, but sure the shock was comparable. Although Naito is very strong, this scene is too exaggerated, a finger blocking a full-out Susanoo's swing. What concept is this? Is Naito really human? Looking at the white figure suspended in the air, everyone couldn't help show a trace of awe, including Oniki and the other 4. This power is already the power of the gods. This is impossible. Madara, who stood inside the Susanoo, looked shocked too. Although he knew that Naito didn't use his finger to block it, and stopped it using that bizarre, shocking force, he still couldn't help but feel stunned by the fact that he could block it anyway. Nothing is impossible. Floating in the air, looking at Madara calmly, he said faintly, "Your vision and insight are so narrow. You used to stand at the apex of this world. You thought that where you stood is the highest point, but in reality, you were just a frog at the bottom of the well." Naito gently bent his finger on the blade of the sword. Crack! The shock force penetrated into it, and a crack suddenly appeared on the Susanoo's sword, spread all the way on the blade, then finally it shattered every inch of it. Seeing this scene, Naito shook his head casually and said, "If this is the case, you won't even be qualified to punch me." As he said, Naito stretched out his hand lightly again and pressed it toward Susanoo's body. Crack! Suddenly, the world in front of Naito shattered like a mirror. These fragmented traces seemed to form a giant hand that was bigger than Susanoo's body. That hand then pressed the Susanoo from above and crushed it. Shattered. Under the Naito's shock force, even Madara's Sage Mode complete Susanoo was still completely wiped out. The ninjas of the allied Shinobi forces, Oniki, and the other were already speechless, and this scene has only made them lose even a few breaths. Madara was very strong, his power was almost unbelievable, but they could understand where that strength came from. However, Naito's power is already beyond the range of their understanding. With just a finger and palm, the Susanoo was utterly destroyed. After the Susanoo was crushed by Naito's palm, the entire battlefield was shattered, while Naito in the sky faintly retracted his hand and took a step forward. He suddenly flickered and fell to the ground below. Countless fragments were gathering back there, gradually converging into Madara's form. His body was made by the Edo Tensei. Although he was crushed by Naito, he still recovered quickly. Do you know this? Naito stood in front of Madara, with a white robe on his body. Without any external force, the truth-seeking Shakujo naturally fell into Naito's hand. Madara, who had just recovered, looked at this scene, and his face darkened, then stared at Naito and said, "You really?" He awakened the Rinnegan eyes, and he naturally knows what power is this. And even he didn't get it yet. His purpose behind becoming the Juubi's Jinchuriki was to get this power. The Six Paths Mode, Truth-Seeking Ball. If you don't have anything else, I won't play with you anymore. Naito casually grabbed it, then he waved it, and Madara's body wholly shattered. At this time, the dust around them gradually settled, and the Shinobi in the distance all saw how Naito finally destroyed Madara's Edo Tensei's body. There was a flash of light in Oniki's eyes, and after taking a deep breath, he shouted, "He has to be sealed, Fuinjutsu team prepare." No need. Kakashi stopped Oniki, who gave the order, then shook his head. He was hit by that black thing, he won't recover. Kakashi had seen this before when Naito defeated the first and second Hokage in Konoha. Although he still doesn't know the composition of that black thing, he still saw what it's capable of. Is it? It was only then that Oniki looked at the thing in Naito's hand carefully. And only then did he sense the chaotic power it contained. That thing, it contains at least 4 or more chakra natures, which exceeds my dust release. Mai listened to Oniki's words, and a strange light flashed in her beautiful eyes, and said, "Sure enough, so Naito already possesses the power of the legendary 6 paths. Perhaps, everything is over anyway." Kakashi sighed lightly, and with a touch of respect and admiration in his eyes, he looked at Naito's back. Not far from the battlefield, the Jidomazo stood here, surrounded by a strong aura, as energy seemed to be flowing inside it. Naruto lay motionless, and it wasn't clear if he was alive or dead. Lying beside him was Sasuke. But at this time, Sasuke's were closed tightly by a weird bandage wrapped on his head, while Black Zetsu was also attached to his body. Suddenly, Sasuke opened his eyes. First, it was the ordinary Sharingan, then the Mangekyo Sharingan, the Eternal Sharingan, and finally, weird circles appeared. Rinnegan. Just about time. End this. Ha ha ha. It's just the beginning. It wasn't Sasuke who said this, Zetsu, who was attached to Sasuke's body, the one who prepared for everything. However, after awakening the Rinnegan, Sasuke began to regain consciousness and struggle, trying to break free of Black Zetsu. But Black Zetsu anticipated this. He knew that it would be challenging to control Sasuke for a long time, especially after he awakened the Rinnegan. He couldn't use his body to seal the Juubi and complete the infinite Tsukuyomi, so he still followed the previous plan and used a seal all of a sudden. Judo Art of Rin Rebirth. The dust gradually dissipated. After Naito used the Shakujo to finally end Madara, he directly turned to look in one direction. He was naturally looking in the direction where Zetsu and Sasuke were hiding. This is very close. Naito's Ultra Perceive could clearly see what was happening, but he didn't stop them. Instead, he just stood there quietly, with his eyes fixed on them. Was this really the Edo Tensei? Although Madara, who was summoned by the Edo Tensei, was strong, he still wasn't qualified enough even to be a warming partner for Naito. For a long time, Naito didn't encounter a worthy opponent who can make him go all out, so he himself doesn't know his current level of strength. Therefore, he hoped that Madara would help him uncover it, but the latter in the Edo Tensei state wasn't enough. Just when Kakashi and the others were about to rush toward Naito after seeing that he seemed to have dealt with Madara, a white light suddenly bloomed in front of Naito. This white light seemed to contain incredible power and instantly shrouded Madara's shattered body. This is Kakashi and the others, who just came over in the distance, stopped again with worry expressions. Instantly, the fragments of Madara's Edo Tensei's body shrouded inside the light and quickly gathered, and a strong aura burst out. Outer Path, Samsara of Heavenly Life Technique. Whoosh! The endless fragments gathered, then condensed into Madara's form and quickly peeled off. When it was condensing, the weird thing is that they could actually see his own bones, flesh, and skin taking form. Suddenly his figure flickered, and he jumped to the top of the distant rock formation. Finally, I can fight with all my strength. As expected, only this body gives the feeling of blood boiling. Madara was excited, looking at his hands. He couldn't help but laugh again. What happened? Onaki and the others were shocked to see this scene. Of course, they figured out that Madara this time wasn't summoned by the Edo Tensei, but he was resurrected entirely. Standing there, Madara's eyes were fixed on Naito, filled with a strong fighting spirit. However, at the next moment, his eyes suddenly began to peel off. Instantly, his pupils disappeared utterly. This technique can resurrect him from the dead, but it can't give him back his Rinnegan eyes. The Rinnegan he had previously was also related to the Edo Tensei form and didn't have the same power as the original. So the moment he was resurrected, they naturally disappeared. This, of course, was expected, so he calmly pressed that fighting intent in his heart and closed his eyelids calmly. Now isn't the time to fight Naito. Thinking of this, Madara didn't hesitate at all. While leaping backward, he quickly started performing hand seals and opened his mouth. He just needed to perform a ninjutsu to get rid of him. After regaining his Rinnegan and sealing the Juubi inside him, he will break again with him. Fire release, hiding in ash and dust technique. Whoosh! In the next moment, the dust in the sky resounded like a wave of air, then instantly enveloped Naito and the others, blocking everyone's sight for an instant. Moreover, these ashes weren't just for blocking sight, they also have high temperature characteristics. However, when the dust fell on Naito, the latter just waved his Shakujo, it immediately got shattered, and an empty area was created around Naito. Hiding in mist technique. Wind release, wind cutter technique. Onaki, Mai, and the others in the back naturally wouldn't be defeated by such a move. Although it was a bit slower than Naito's reaction, they also quickly cast their own ninjutsu to get rid of these ashes. However, when the 5 Kage looked around, there was no trace of Uchiha Madara, only Naito was standing there calmly. What is Uchiha Madara? Did he escape? Unexpectedly, Madara was completely resurrected, and it seemed that even Naito couldn't prevent it. nor could stop him from escaping, which made the others anxious again. Kakashi looked at Naito, a bit confused. He knew what kind of power Naito possesses. He should be able to prevent Madara's resurrection, and indeed, if Naito wanted, he would have stopped him from escaping. Looking at Naito's faint expression, Kakashi couldn't guess what Naito was thinking. The timing is just really right. Standing there quietly, looking into the distance, Naito's expression changed. There were traces of disdain and sarcasm. Next time, maybe I can be a little more serious. Suddenly, Naito's figure slowly disappeared silently under everyone's gaze. Whoosh! The place where Madara resurrected was already very close to the place where Zetsu hid, so after using that technique, he quickly reached it with a few flickers. At this time, Zetsu was attached to Sasuke's body, and the latter's consciousness had clearly awakened, fighting with Zetsu to take control of his body, and at the same time, he wanted to obliterate him. You can't control me. Half of Sasuke's body was attached to Zetsu, but his killing intent was powerful. At the same time, a terrifying force surged out of his body, as it was meant to force Zetsu out. Zetsu gradually couldn't control Sasuke anymore, but he didn't have the slightest of panic. Instead, he sneered and said, "Give up the struggle, you're just a container of the Rinnegan, now it's time to hand over these eyes." Container. Sasuke sneered and said, "You're wrong. This is my power. With this power, I can do anything. Now you have no control over me. It's your end." "No, it's you, Sasuke." Half of Zetsu's body was already expelled, and it was a matter of time before Sasuke could get rid of him, and when that happens, Sasuke surely will not give him a chance to escape. And just when Sasuke was about to use all of his strength to drive Zetsu completely away, then kill him, Uchiha Madara's figure finally flickered and came to the room. "It seems you have a little problem here." Madara, closing his eyes, approached Zetsu and Sasuke. Zetsu smiled and said, "Of course, it's not that easy to control someone with the Rinnegan. This is something expected. Besides, how's your body now, Madara-sama?" "Your Uchiha Madara." Sasuke was shocked the moment he saw Madara. He always felt as if he had fallen into a trap, so he tried his best to finally get rid of Zetsu completely. However, Madara suddenly stretched out his hand, pressed it on Sasuke's body lightly, and suddenly it got stagnated. He could only watch as Madara took away his Rinnegan eyes. After he easily took Sasuke's Rinnegan eyes, Madara pressed it directly into his eye sockets, then opened his eyelids. The scene was hideous and terrifying as the blood slid from the corner of his eyes, but Madara looked excited. "Finally, everything is perfect. Damn. Sasuke got rid of that stagnation, but he lost his eyes. He wasn't gonna give up though, and with an angry expression, he suddenly drew his sword out and waved it at Madara, who easily avoided it and knocked him to the ground. Looking at Sasuke, who fell on the ground, Zetsu walked over and said with a sneer, "I told you a long time ago, Sasuke, you're just a container for Madara-sama to prepare his Rinnegan eyes." Sasuke's heart was full of madness. He struggled, but he couldn't stand anymore and fell beside Naruto. At the same time, he felt that Naruto seemed to be slowly dying, just like him. His body gradually became cold, and he started to lose consciousness. "What have I done?" Madara didn't even look at Sasuke and Naruto on the ground. He wiped the blood off the corner of his eyes with a touch of his hand, then easily gained control over the Rinnegan eyes. For Madara, who has opened the Rinnegan before, even if these eyes are not his own, he can easily control them. After getting the Rinnegan again, Madara didn't hesitate at all. Completely ignoring the dying Sasuke and Naruto, he turned to look at the Jidomazo behind him. Although he's now way stronger than before, he knew that he may still not be Naito's opponent. Boom! Instantly, white smoke suddenly burst out from the Jidomazo, and a huge chakra wave broke out, trembling the world. Roar! In the smoke, the body of the Jidomazo suddenly started moving and roared up to the sky. This is no longer the Jidomazo, this is the Juubi. Ten-Tailed chakra fluctuations instantly shook the world. Almost all the ninjas on the battlefield could feel its terrifying chakra. Oniki and the others ordered everyone to look for Madara, and they suddenly felt these horrifying chakra fluctuations, and their expressions changed. That direction. Let's go. Damn, how could there be such chakra? This is simply. Gradually approaching the location, cold sweat started to appear on Oniki and the others' foreheads, as they felt the Juubi's aura suppressing them. The Juubi. Madara looked at the touring Ten-Tails smirking, and with a loud scream, he moved his head and suddenly sealed it. Instantly, the Juubi's figure distorted turned into dazzling energy, then directly rushed toward Madara's body and got completely absorbed by him. Madara's hair suddenly turned white, and the armor on his body disappeared silently, turning into the Six Paths robe in a flash. The truth-seeking balls appeared behind him, and the shakujo in his hand. Six Paths mode. Open. Is this the power of the Six Paths? Ha 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 ha. Feeling that the power he possessed at this moment was far greater than before, Madara finally looked to the sky and laughed. This time, the laughter was full of disdain for everything. Smiling, Madara's laugh gradually stopped, and his brows slightly frowned. Because at that moment, a figure suddenly appeared in front of him, floating in the air. Are you happy with the power of the Six Paths? Naito stood there quietly, looking at Madara. However, Madara could feel it, even though he has awakened his Six Paths mode, Naito was still looking down on him. Zetsu finally faced Naito for the first time and felt his aura. Standing beside Madara, he couldn't help but shrink his body, and at the same time, he was glancing at Madara on the side. Although I don't know why you didn't try to stop me, since I've come to this point, this world will completely belong to me. Holding the shakujo in chi hand, Madara looked at Naito and spoke slowly. Madara actually knew very well that even if his technique could stop Naito a little, it wouldn't be enough to make him run all the way here, get the Rinnegan eyes, and seal the Juubi inside him. The original plan was to make Zetsu take the Rinnegan eyes and bring them to him, saving time, but Sasuke has almost killed Black Zetsu. If Naito wanted to stop him, it would have been the end for him. However, Madara could roughly understand why Naito didn't stop him. Because he once stood in the same place as Naito, overlooking everything, and sought to find a strong opponent. Madara had Hashirama in his time, but Naito stood alone at the highest point. Naito wanted an opponent, so he didn't stop him. This is what Madara thought. He also believed that only Naito is qualified to be his opponent. This world belongs to you. Do you really think so? As he floated in the air, with the truth-seeking balls behind him, Naito looked at Madara calmly, then a hint of mockery suddenly appeared on his face. Naito and Madara levitated in the sky, standing far away. At this time, Kakashi and the others finally reached the place, looking at Madara in the sky, a look of shock appeared on their faces. They could see that Madara's state this time was obviously the same as Naito's. Both possessed the black orbs, and their hair had turned white, and both were holding the shakujo in their hands. The only difference is their clothes. Madara actually awakened the power of the 6 paths. How did he do it? Oniki looked at Madara with a trace of horror. If there is only one 6 paths existence, perhaps he wouldn't feel such pressure. However, with 2 6 paths users, their aura was confronting each other, creating waves of energies that were forcing a terrifying sense of oppression. Those weak ninjas can't even get close to this area. Naruto. Sasuke. At this moment, Kakashi's gazes suddenly caught Naruto and Sasuke lying on the ground, and suddenly rushed to them. After carefully checking their bodies, Kakashi screamed painfully and loudly. He couldn't perceive the Kyuubi's chakra inside Naruto's body. It was evident that the Kyuubi was taken away from him. Sasuke's body was also in a mess, and his eyes were taken away from him. Although Sasuke betrayed the village, for Kakashi, Sasuke is still his student, not to mention Naruto's situation was worse than Sasuke's. Kakashi carried Naruto in one hand and Sasuke in the other, and was about to head to the medical squad quickly, but he suddenly froze, feeling that their state seemed to be inexplicably better. Although they were still dying a moment ago, they no longer seemed to be in a dying state. Sure enough, that guy couldn't just stand it. Naito, who had been floating in the sky, glanced at Naruto and Sasuke all of a sudden. Madara felt that something was strange too, and glanced at Naruto and Sasuke, then frowned slightly, sensing some fluctuations of the 6 paths power. This is the power of the 6 paths. It's normal for Sasuke to have fluctuations of the 6 paths power within him since he awakened the Rinnegan, but he sensed the same fluctuations coming out of Naruto's body, saving him from death, which made Madara a bit confused. He can faintly feel that there seems to be a strange power surging within their bodies, but it wasn't strong, it's actually fragile. Compared to Madara, Naito could clearly perceive that the will of the Hagoromo had fallen on Naruto and Sasuke. However, that power was only enough to save both of them. After rescuing Naruto and Sasuke with the last remaining power, Hagoromo took an in-depth look at Naito and then disappeared again. It seems that there are still some things in this world that I don't know, but that's not important anymore. Madara locked his eyes on Naito again, with a very sharp look, full of fighting spirit. Today he has been wholly resurrected, obtained the Rinnegan, sealed the Juubi's chakra inside him, and awakened his 6 paths mode. In his opinion, even if Naito possesses the truth-seeking balls and awakened the 6 paths mode, it's impossible for him to be the opponent of the Juubi's Jinchuriki. But in any case, Madara didn't hesitate to go all out from the start, and directly activated the real Rinnegan, the Dojutsu power that far exceeded Nagato. This is the real power of the Rinnegan. Limbo, border jail. Instantly, a world invisible to the naked eyes descended, completely overlapping with this world, and acting as a shadow to it. 4 of Madara's shadows emerged, and then they rushed toward Naito, attacking from 4 different directions simultaneously. Madara's original body was standing there motionless, staring at Naito. So this is the limbo, I finally got to see it. It's impossible to see with the naked eye, but Naito's Ultra Perceive can clearly sense it along with Madara's 4 shadows. Holding the shakujo in his hand, Naito casually waved it. Crack! A white crack suddenly exploded around Naito, and Madara's 4 shadows collapsed almost instantly, merged into the limbo world, and disappeared. Unexpectedly, I can affect the limbo world. Seeing this scene, Madara frowned slightly. He initially thought that after stepping into the 6 paths realm, the limbo could quickly gain the upper hand and even easily defeat Naito. But Naito could not only see through the limbo world, but the shadows couldn't even resist Naito's attack at all and were wiped by Naito with a wave of his hand. At this time, some questions were finally raised in Madara's mind. Why does Naito's shock power still work with the Six Paths power? Humph. Feeling a little uneasy, Madara snorted coldly, forcibly calming his mind, and summoned the shadows again to attack Naito. In the next moment, his body suddenly exchanged position with the shadow, and suddenly flashed in front of Naito, and waved his shakujo down at the top of Naito's head. This is the Six Paths powers. Of course, it's all about this realm. Whoever has the strongest Six Paths powers will have the advantage. In Madara's view, after he sealed the Juubi within him, his chakra must have even reached the Six Paths level. Even if Naito stepped into the Six Paths realms through some other means, his power could not be compared to him. Looking at Madara, who was swinging his shakujo down on him, Naito snorted and waved his shakujo upward. Hum. The two shakujos collided, making a dull sound as if two pieces of leather were slamming. At the same time, the aura of the Six Paths power rippled in all directions, causing the surrounding space to wave like water. Uchiha Madara, holding his shakujo in his hand, pressed hard against Naito with an extremely confident expression. However, just a second later, his expression changed drastically. Crack! A weird power suddenly passed from Naito's shakujo, causing a crack to appear on Madara's shakujo. This crack spread in an instant, and finally, Madara's shakujo got shattered to pieces. What? Watching this scene, Madara was shocked. Instantly, he felt a shocking force that was terrifying to the extreme, crashing his body. Moreover, Madara felt a threat of death at this moment. It seemed that this shocking force could harm him, someone who had the body of the Six Paths, and even kill him. Horrified, Madara didn't think much about it, and without hesitation, he switched positions with the shadows of the limbo. Crack! The air in front of Naito burst like a mirror, and Madara's shadow was directly shattered, while Madara fell back to the distance, looking at Naito vigilantly. Is that shock force originally one of the Six Paths power? It's just like my Rin Sharingan techniques, an ability that can be used in a battle of such level. As if he understood something, Madara's face darkened, thinking of a way to defeat Naito's shock power. Naito and Madara's confrontation didn't look like a battle that could turn the world into ruins. It was like two ordinary people tapping with sticks. However, the collision of their Six Paths powers still brought extreme oppression to the shinobi below. What is this? After the shakujo got shattered, a small piece fell from the sky on the top of a shinobi. Although he knew it might be dangerous, he didn't avoid it sideways. Instead, he tried to block it with his hand first, then pick it up. At this time, Oniki, on the side, saw this scene and couldn't help but exclaim, "Do not touch it!" Oniki's exclamation instantly brought the eyes of all the ninjas, but it was too late. The shard of Madara's shakujo falls on the ninja's kunai, and without a sound, it directly penetrated it, and then fell on his forehead, and ran through it all the way to the ground. Under everyone's horrified gazes, the ninja's body suddenly froze, instantly collapsed, and disappeared silently without a trace of blood. At this moment, everyone was horrified. Looking at the remaining shards falling from the sky, everyone ran scared as if they were looking at some kind of a beast. However, they suddenly stopped falling, gathered again, taking the form of the shakujo, and then flew back to Madara's hand. After that horrible scene just now, no one dared to underestimate the shakujo of the Six Paths. At that moment, some people have even started to think of fleeing. Stay back. Oniki, who also looked terrified, took a deep breath, then he shouted in a deep voice, ordering everyone to retreat. A battlefield that has both Naito and Madara isn't a place where an ordinary person can stand. They weren't even qualified to watch them from close. In the sky, Naito was carefully observing the realm of the limbo. Naito was interested in the limbo because it seems to be a technique similar to HolyOniiSama. Kaguya's technique is a bit different. Unlike any other space jutsu technique, she doesn't use it to move her body to the other realm, but to bring the dimension to herself, which is similar to the limbo. But what Kaguya brings becomes the main realm, while the limbo works as a shadow to the original world. Naito's power has reached the level of destroying the world, but creation is much more complicated than destruction. Naito studied the limbo, just to observe this power. The world of the limbo is still a bit interesting. Physical attacks are ineffective against these shadows, but shadows can attack and interact with things in the real world. Madara is thinking about how to deal with Naito's shock force, while Naito is studying Madara's limbo. Strictly speaking, the limbo technique is a kind of space ninjutsu. Madara's ability to swap positions with the shadows has proved this. However, the limbo world is a realm that overlaps the shinobi world, and the HolyOniiSama summons a world to take place inside this world. As for Kaguya's Yomatsu Hirozaka, Naito didn't see it yet, so he can't be sure. When Madara saw that Naito didn't do anything, he naturally didn't rush into action too, but he still couldn't find a way to defeat the shock force. After a long period of thought, he concluded that this power has always been the problem. That force is really troublesome. If I want to defeat it, it seems that the only choice is to use my strongest force to conquer it from the front. The thinking process has finally stopped, and Madara was about to take action. Naito has also finished observing the limbo world. Hearing Madara's words, he looked at him and said lightly, "In a way, your answer is right." Humph. Madara was very annoyed by Naito's attitude to him. He acted as if he was in control of everything, so after taking a deep breath, his hands suddenly performed a hand sign, and the power of the 6 paths all over his body surged violently. At the same time, his eyes were surging a horrifying power, and under this gathering of energy, it seemed as if the entire world was trembling. To be precise, it was the limbo world that has started trembling. This is... Naito looked a little surprised. In his perception, he could sense the limbo world shrinking, but at the same time, an extremely powerful force was bursting out of it. All of this was extremely hard to describe, but it only took less than a single breath. Limbo, extinguishing the prison's borders. The energy burst out of Madara's Rin-Sharingan instantly as he shouted the name of his technique. Limbo, destroy the prison's borders. Whoosh! Instantly, all the shadows in the limbo world disappeared. At the same time, the world inside started trembling, shaking, and shrinking quickly. Simultaneously, countless sharp black thorns burst out of its, targeting Naito in the middle. He's actually using the shadow world to attack me. He never revealed this technique in the original. Naito sensed the shadow thorns around, then shook his head, saying, "But, it's useless." Crack! Out of Naito's body, a violent, shocking force suddenly burst out in all directions, distorting the surrounding space. With that, all of the shadow thorns collapsed instantly. This isn't over yet. Madara maintained, forming the hand sign. At first, he was surprised by Naito's strength, then he cried out loud. Obviously, he was exerting his full strength. Whoosh! Instantly, the limbo world shrank to the limit, completely enclosing Naito in it, then shrink even more fiercely, leaving nothing behind. The limbo world seemed to have needed Naito in it, then finally burst apart. Boom! This time, the limbo world explosion has even affected the realm of the Shinobi world, causing the world to overturn for a moment, then suddenly a terrifying huge cut appeared in the void and spread to an endless distance. This devastating scene horrified Oniki and the others, but fortunately, they had already retreated a long distance. There was no harm. In the center of the explosion, even pitch-black huge space crack appeared. However, this crack couldn't affect Madara. Since he finally got rid of Naito, he calmly floated in the air looking at the crack. It's over. No matter how strong he is, it's impossible to block this technique. Seeing that Naito seemed to have finally disappeared without leaving any trace, and the black space crack gradually began to heal, Madara raised his head proudly to look at the sky, preparing to start the infinite Tsukuyomi. Suddenly, crack! The black crack that was closing a moment ago received a big energy shot and instantly broke again. Madara looked shocked as he saw two illusionary hands suddenly grasping the edges of the cracked space and tearing it fiercely. Whoosh! The cracks in the space slowly disappeared, as the illusory figure that stepped out of it gradually regained its colors, reforming Naito's appearance. It's really worthy of the Rin Sharingan. Although it's not comparable to a Momoshiki, it really has the power to destroy the world. Naito's body was unscathed, without even a tear on his clothes. He stood there calmly looking at Madara. This is simply incredible. Impossible, unless Naito has already surpassed the power of the six paths. Come on, don't show that expression. In fact, you have already caused me to consume some of my strength, even though it was only a little of my physical strength. Looking at Madara, Naito smirked. Madara's technique, destroying the prison's borders, condensed all of the power in one point, shattered the space, and sucked Naito into the turbulent flow of the void, so Naito ended up consuming a little of his power. Of course, it was just a bit. This level of power can't kill Kaguya, so it won't kill Naito too. Even if Madara has become the Juubi's Jinchuriki, there is still a qualitative gap between him and Naito. Impossible, this is impossible. Madara looked at Naito in disbelief. At this moment, he finally felt the gap. However, no matter how he tried to find the answer, he never found why there was still such a big gap, even though he awakened the six paths power and sealed the Juubi inside him. Nothing is impossible. Naito looked at Madara faintly, then blasted him with a fist. Boom! The force of shock rushed toward him, and Madara, who has just used the limbo, couldn't use it again for a short time, nor could he avoid Naito's attack. He had no choice but to use all of the truth-seeking balls to create a barrier in front of him. However, this barrier was like a mere fragile mirror that was shattered to pieces the moment the shock force reached it. Immediately after that, Madara's body was blown to pieces by Naito's punch. Even at that moment, Madara couldn't believe how he lost. It was not until his body was completely destroyed that he could accept this fact. He was wholly resurrected, got the Rin Sharingan, and became the Juubi's Jinchuriki. Compared to his peak period, he was many times stronger, yet he couldn't even be Naito's opponent. What happened during the time he died? What did Naito do? Madara couldn't find any answers to these questions in that short time. Naito's punch, even a six paths body, couldn't bear it. After his body got exploded, he lost consciousness and died. Watching Madara's death, Naito sighed. As expected, even 6 paths Madara wasn't qualified to make him fight seriously. From the very beginning, Naito was teasing Madara just like he did with the 5 Kage. Madara failed to make Naito serious. In the distance, Kage, such as Oniki, Mai, as well as some ninjas from the Shinobi allied forces, such as Sakura, Hinata, and others, gathered around. At this time, almost everyone was in disbelief. Uchiha Madara died just like that. Uchiha Madara, who had gained the power of the 6 paths, seemed to be equal to Naito and seemed to even be able to have an earth-shattering battle with Naito, yet he died silently. Madara's power couldn't even tear Naito's clothes, and the latter destroyed him with a punch. Even Uchiha Madara, who awakened the 6 paths powers, isn't Naito's opponent. Just how strong is Naito? No one could answer this question. The boundless white world. Madara stood here lowering his head and looking at his hands, confused. You're here too, Madara. At this moment, several figures appeared in front of Madara. One of them was Senju Hashirama and the other Otsutsuki Hagoromo. Hashirama. Madara raised his head and looked at Hashirama, with a trace of endless loneliness in his eyes. Hashirama smiled and said, "We shouldn't have appeared in that world anymore, right? Besides." Speaking of this, Hashirama's expression changed, and he stared at Madara. "You have caused a big problem. Is that so?" Madara walked to Hashirama's front and then looked at Hagoromo. Although he hadn't seen him before, he recognized him instantly. Hagoromo looked at Madara, and Hashirama shook his head. Then with the shakujo in his hand, he pointed at the vast white void below, and the Shinobi world appeared before their eyes. Seeing what was happening in the Shinobi world, Madara got shocked. "This is..." "Yes, Madara, you thought you were in control, but in fact, you were just being used." Hashirama also looked at the Shinobi world below and then sighed softly, "But we're all dead now, we can only rely on him." After Madara was bombarded with Naito's punch, his body, as well as his 6 paths strengths and his chakra, were destroyed by that punch. Suddenly, these scattered chakras were attracted by some kind of force and surged wildly into the direction of the sky. Have it finally started? Naito raised his head to look at the sky. At that moment, Zetsu, who kept hiding during Madara and Naito's battle, finally appeared, with a tricky evil smile on his face, looking at the sky. Whoosh! The chakra flew to the sky and finally gathered together, not turning into a figure, but into a huge eye that flashed in the deep starry sky. In this eye, there were wave marks, and 9 tomo divided into 3 circles. This was the Rin Sharingan. In the next moment, the Rin Sharingan suddenly burst out with a bright light, covering the entire ninja world and everything under it. The light penetrated the building, the shadows, and fell on everything. Infinite Tsukuyomi. Ha 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 ha. Zetsu watched the light shining down, and finally let out a creepy, weird laugh full of evil and madness. "I didn't expect it. But even Naito has never been the savior, just like Madara and Sasuke, he was just a container." In the Shinobi world at this time, the same patterns on the Rin Sharingan appeared in everyone's eyes, then every single human under the sky froze there in their places, frozen, and each fell into his respective dream world. However, Naito, who was standing in the sky, wasn't affected and pondered looking at the Rin Sharingan. At the same time, Naito felt that this power that belonged to the ancestor of chakra seemed familiar, as if this power, he could also use it. This made Naito couldn't help but think of the initial starting point, the Gura Gura no Mi fruit that he ate. That thing, is it really a devil fruit? is it actually? The traces of suspicion appeared on Naito's expression. And Zetsu realized that Naito wasn't affected by the infinite Tsukuyomi's genjutsu, and his face darkened. That Naito, even though he doesn't have the Rinnegan, he wasn't affected by the infinite Tsukuyomi. But that doesn't matter, Mother is about to be resurrected, and nothing will remain with her. Instantly, Zetsu rose to the sky facing the Rin Sharingan, then performed a seal using both hands. God Tree. Rumble. The earth roared and trembled. This time it was the entire land of the Shinobi world. Thick roots grow out of the ground and extend out simultaneously, wrapping everyone in it and connecting them with the sacred tree. At the same time, the endless chakra began to surge wildly after being drawn out of everyone. This time, using the entire world, Kaguya's will was gathered along with the chakra flow that was bursting out of the God Tree and even visible to the naked eye. The chakra wasn't only extracted from the ninjas. It was being drained out from every source of chakra in the Shinobi world, even dragon veins themselves. Naito floated in the sky, watching this scene quietly. Inside that endless flow of chakra, a figure full of majesty gradually emerged. Zetsu attached to it, looking at Naito with a smug grin. Naito didn't move for a while. He was just floating in the air. And Zetsu thought that Naito must have never expected something like, and was shocked, so he couldn't do anything. Of course, even if he did, it would have been impossible to stop it after it has started. From the moment the infinite Tsukuyomi was cast, nothing would have able to Kaguya from being resurrected. Naito, although you're very strong, you forced me to hide for a long time, but I finally completed the last step. Now everything will be over. Yeah, everything is over. Naito looked at Zetsu, glanced at Kaguya as she gathered her power, then shook his head slightly, and looked again at Zetsu indifferently. The way he looked at him made Zetsu's mind tremble because Naito didn't seem stunned, but as if he had foreseen this a long time ago. Impossible, impossible. Zetsu took a deep breath and tried to remain calm as he reminded himself that everything has been going according to his plan. Then he gritted his teeth and said, "Whatever you're planning to do is useless, my mother will be resurrected soon. She's the progenitor of chakra, she's Otsutsuki Kaguya, right?" Naito interrupted Zetsu's words and looked at him indifferently as if he was an existence even higher than the mother he was talking about. "It must be really difficult for you since you regard yourself as the person who wrote the entire history of the Shinobi world. Or should I call you Kaguya's third son, Hagoromo's younger brother? Or maybe you prefer Kaguya's will materialization." Naito's tone was very light, but when it was heard by Zetsu, it felt as if it was rumbling thunder. If he was a human, the cold sweat would have soaked his back. He looked at Naito horrifiedly and said in disbelief, "You bastard, how did you know? Is it Hagoromo?" "No. Even Hagoromo doesn't know of my existence." Panicking, Zetsu looked at Kaguya, who was regaining her form, then gritted his teeth. "Even if you knew everything, nothing would change. Mother has already been resurrected, and you can't stop it." Humph. Hearing Zetsu's words, Naito finally snorted coldly and said, "You really thought that without my consent, this little trick of yours would have succeeded in bringing her back to life?" Boom. This sentence completely roared in Zetsu's heart like 1,000 bolts of thunder. For a long time, Zetsu was uneasy because everything went so smoothly, and Naito didn't seem like he was trying to stop him. All that he needed to do is plug any small step to successfully ruin his plan. If Naito knew all of this and let him carry on and resurrect Kaguya, then what is exactly Naito's purpose? did he also want Kaguya to resurrect? Thinking of all of this, Zetsu seemed like he realized something, and with a terrified expression, he looked at Naito and said, "Could it be that you are?" Naito knew what Zetsu thought of the enemies that even Kaguya feared, Otsutsuki Momoshiki and Kinshiki. In shock, Zetsu quickly leaned toward Kaguya's body, which had almost regained her consciousness and wanted to attach to her. But Naito pointed at him indifferently, saying, "You no longer need to exist. Stop." A sharp shout emitted, but Naito has already flickered his fingers. Boom! Zetsu's horrified expression froze on his face, his body abruptly stagnated, then it exploded as if he was a bubble. Zetsu died. Man. The person who asked him to stop was unexpectedly the ultimately resurrected Kaguya, but her reactions were a bit late, and couldn't stop Naito from killing Zetsu. After his body shattered, it turned into countless black fragments and merged into Kaguya's body, and with that, Kaguya's will was finally completed. Naito could clearly perceive that the Shinobi world was emptied from Kaguya's will. Kaguya's will was finally assembled. In other words, as long as he defeats Kaguya in front of him, and then seals the infinite Tsukuyomi and the God Tree, everything will be over. Although Kaguya was extremely angry because Naito killed Zetsu, she didn't directly act but looked at him with icy eyes. Unexpectedly, the second fruit of the sacred tree appeared after my death. Hearing Kaguya's words, Naito didn't look surprised. Earlier, when he sensed the God Tree and the chakra that was gathering from every source of chakra in this world, he had figured this out. And Kaguya's words finally completely confirmed Naito's suspicion. To be precise, it should be the God Tree seed. Looking at Kaguya in front of him, while sensing the power brewing inside her, Naito shook his head slightly. A long time ago. A seed that no one knows where it came from fell into this world. It may have been planted by Kaguya's ancestors, or it may have been sprinkled by Momoshiki and Kinshiki. After this seed fell into this world, it began to absorb the power of this word and continued to grow, until it finally turned into a towering tree, which is the God Tree. In order to obtain the fruit of the sacred tree, Kaguya came to this world from a faraway place, ate the fruit of the God Tree, and became the god of this world. However, she was also afraid that Momoshiki and Kinshiki would come to grab the fruit of the God Tree, so she created the infinite Tsukuyomi, and those who were enveloped by it would gradually become her army, the White Zetsu. These weren't just her soldiers, but they were also supposed to be her chakra stage props. All that she wanted is more chakra and stronger power. After that, her two sons, Hagoromo and Hamura, joined their powers to seal her, and completely disperse her power into countless shares. The source of all these powers is the fruit of the sacred tree. And the thing that Naito ate and looked like a devil fruit was actually the second seed of the God Tree that fell into the Shinobi world. Since the Shinobi world continued to develop and the God Tree continued to grow while Kaguya was sealed off, it produced another seed. And if anyone else eats its fruit, he will become the second progenitor of chakra. However, before it could make roots, it was discovered by Naito, and he ate it. Because it was just a seed and didn't draw any power from this world, Naito, who ate the God Tree seed, needed to practice continuously to improve his strength. In the end, Naito finally reached the level of the progenitor of chakra. The so-called shock force can eliminate the effects of all kinds of genjutsu and even destroy the truth-seeking balls. In fact, it is the source of all powers. Kaguya's God Tree gave her the power of the truth-seeking balls and dojutsu, and Naito's God Tree gave him the power of the truth-seeking balls too, but it didn't give him dojutsu, it gave him the shock force. Two God Tree, one is inclined to the spiritual level, which controls everything with the dojutsu, and the other is inclined to the physical level, which is to destroy everything. The seed of the God tree. Kaguya looked down, and muttered to himself. Even Naito didn't know what she was thinking. Suddenly she raised her gaze again, then stared at Naito, revealing a strong desire and greed, and with a tone filled with cold killing intent, Kaguya said, "Only I should have chakra." Kaguya's desire was longing for Naito's power. If she can take his power and merge the power of two tree gods, she can become even stronger. Perhaps at that time, even those enemies from her origins will fear her and leave her be, and she wouldn't even need to transform soldiers anymore. The moment Kaguya's killing intent rushed out, the world seemed to have echoed her will, and it suddenly became cold, so cold that the wind felt like it was piercing the body. It was as if they were in a freezing hell. Suddenly, the cold hell turned into a hot burning hell, as the magma realm replaced the shinobi world. Amenominka. This was Kaguya's dojutsu technique, bringing over her personal dimensions instantly. It's no longer a power a human being can have, even Madara's limbo isn't a match to it. Because this magma world is not a void of space, but a real world, which is created by Kaguya. This is the ultimate technique of the Rin Sharingan, the power of the mother of chakra. Sure enough, it's powerful. It's really breathtaking to forcibly replace dimensions. Naito was still floating in the air. The place was burning, yes, but the magma couldn't even ignite the corner of Naito's clothes, yet he couldn't help but look around with a hint of admiration. In terms of creation, I have to say that Kaguya's God Tree fruit has granted her things even Naito isn't capable of. But if it comes to destruction, it will always be more straightforward than creation. Kaguya came out to take everything for herself, and Naito will naturally not let her do to him what she did to Madara. Although Naito has absolute self-confidence, Kaguya is an opponent that he needs to take seriously. As a result, Naito clenched his fists and was ready to blast a punch at Kaguya. Boom! The world roared and trembled. The two were inside a volcano, and it blasted to pieces under Naito's punch, and the endless magma roared violently. The magma flew like a sea wave. However, both Kaguya and Naito ignored it. With the shocking force wrapping his fist, Naito smashed the void in front of him fiercely. Feeling this power, Kaguya's expression changed slightly. Although she was determined to kill Naito, Kaguya wasn't sure of her power. After all, she wasn't like him. Kaguya has been powerful from the beginning. She didn't have to go through all of that suffering, training, and battles to reach the peak. She never gained her confidence and will, through her achievement. And this was her weakness. Even if she possesses the same power as Naito, she can't defeat him. The disparity in the will is what she's too far behind. 80 Gods Vacuum Attack. Boom! 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 The chakra surged violently in Kaguya's body, shaking the earth and the heavens instantly. Countless fists suddenly appeared and rushed toward Naito to bombard him. 80 Gods Vacuum Attack. Offensively and defensively, this move was far more powerful than any Hyuga techniques. Facing the chakra fists that shook the world and even made the space tremble, Naito's movements didn't change, and he still finished his punch. The plan was to crush the thousands of punches with one punch. Boom! The 80 Gods Vacuum and Naito's punch collided, shaking the world, and directly causing the sea of magma below to blast fiercely, making the endless magma sweep in all directions. Under the power of Naito's one punch, the 80 Gods Vacuum stagnated midair with a few signs of fragmentations around, that spread out instantly and finally crashed it. No. Kaguya exclaimed secretly. She didn't expect Naito's power to be so terrifying. Even the 80 Gods vacuum attack that she put all of her power in it wasn't an opponent at all. Her Rin Sharingan at that moment suddenly flickered, and the whole realm changed again, and they appeared instantly inside an acid-filled ocean realm. There seems to be no air in this world, and it was entirely made of acid. The effect of Naito's punch was left in the magma world, while Naito and Kaguya fell into this acid ocean. ZZ. Instantly, Naito's cloak showed signs of corrosion. This was a first. Any regular acid wouldn't affect Naito's clothes even if it was 10 times stronger, but this place belongs to Kaguya's space, so these acid liquid here are also part of her power, and it contains the 6 paths strength. Acid. Naito's looked right and left, but he didn't panic. His mind was as calm as ever, and his body suddenly turned into an acid form, which somewhat surprised Kaguya. If Kaguya's body is immortal with super regenerative ability, then Naito's body is on a higher level of ever-changing. Even if it is this acid, his body can transform and blend with it instantly. This guy's abilities are very strange. Kaguya merged into the surrounding space and didn't reveal herself. When the 80 Gods vacuum attack was smashed by Naito, she knew she couldn't fight against Naito head-on. However, even if your body can turn into an acid, as long as it's caught, you will definitely die. Kaguya, who was hidden, stared at Naito coldly, then suddenly opened a space portal behind Naito, and with a wave of her hand, a grey bone suddenly fell on Naito's body. All-killing Ush bones. This technique is far superior to Kimimro's Shikatsu Myaku, and what is brewing in it is a powerful and extreme energy that can kill even a user of the 6 paths strength. Naito's Ultra Perceive has long been sensing everything around him, and he clearly saw it as soon as the portal was opened. At will, his body turned into the illusory form and rushed toward the space portal. Whoosh! The killing bones penetrated Naito's body but left no trace, as if it was utterly ineffective to him. Suddenly, as the space portal was closing, Naito's hand grabbed its edges and tore them severely. Crack! Like the sound of shattered glass, the entire space trembled fiercely and suddenly exploded. After all, this place was just a small world created by Kaguya. It wasn't the Shinobi world, and the spatial structure was less stable than the Shinobi realm. This is impossible. Kaguya, who was hiding in the cracks of the space, looked shocked. It's not because Naito ignored her all-killing Ush bones, it was due to the fact that he fiercely tore open the space portal created by her with his hands. Naito doesn't seem to be able to create a space portal, but he can use a more violent A to forcefully smash the space and tear it out. Moreover, all-killing Ush's bones passed through his body. Naito turned to a kind of illusory form, completely ignoring her attack. This technique may have an unbelievable power on ordinary 6 paths users, but it's entirely ineffective for Naito. After severely tearing apart the space portal, Naito stepped into it without hesitation. This was a dark world, or a gap in space, where countless crystal wall-like spaces can be vaguely seen. The pyramid-shaped dimension was the closest, the crystal ice the second, and the desert was the farthest. There are a total of 6 dimensions. They seemed to be very close, but space here cannot be measured by the distance that the naked eye can see. Ordinary people who come here will exhaust their life force before getting near any of these sides. At first, Naito was a little surprised by the scenery around him, then he looked at the shocked Kaguya, and without saying anything, he threw a punch. Boom! The space around the fist directly cracked. Kaguya tried to open a space portal and escape, but she didn't expect Naito's punch to bend and distort the space. The moment she opened that space portal, it abruptly twisted. However, it was either facing Naito's punch or going in, so she entered the unstable space portal. Immediately, Naito's shock force blasted the vortex-shaped space portal. Boom! The shock force completely smashed the portal. Naito couldn't control the space like Kaguya, who could summon dimensions and control them at will. However, Naito could destroy dimensions. If Kaguya's power is controlled, then Naito's power is pure destruction. Where do you think you're going? Seeing that Kaguya was totally unwilling to fight him head-on, Naito couldn't let her escape. Without any hesitation, Naito turned into an illusory form and went through the unstable space portal. Silence. Naito appeared in a weird space. The ground here seemed to be made from crystalline, containing terrifying strong gravity that instantly pulled Naito's body from the sky to the ground. However, it seems that he was on the wrong path. Kaguya wasn't here. Humph. Naito glanced around, and after a cold snort, he threw a punch. Boom! Space was shattered, and a black hole appeared in front of Naito, who stepped through it without thinking twice and came to the ice and snow world. There he finally found Kaguya, whose expression changed the moment she saw him and turned around without hesitation. She had never expected that Naito's power would be this violent. He was simply smashing the space and chasing her around from one dimension to another. Kaguya would rather face Hagoromo and Hamura once again and fight against the Rinnegan and the Tensogun than fight against a space crusher like Naito. Crack! Crack! Suddenly Naito heard the sound of the ice cracking. He looked at his foot to find that he was already freezing, and in a matter of a second, his entire body froze. However, a bright white light suddenly burst from Naito's body, and the ice exploded as the cracks surrounded Naito's body. The traces of fragmentation continued to spread in all directions, reaching every edge of the ice world and shattering it all. However, as he focused on destroying this realm, Kaguya took this opportunity to open another portal and escape. Naito's expression was indifferent. Even if she escaped, he will just crush the space again and chase her. A total of 6 realms, and Kaguya and Naito kept circling around them. Kaguya was beaten by Naito every time, occasionally trying to use her all-killing Ushbones technique, but Naito smashed it every time with his fist. Kaguya, however, was the ancestor of chakra. She could use every bloodline limit that the world has once known, yet no matter what kind of trick she used, Naito's answer was always simple: one punch to destroy everything. Kaguya never thought that the battle would turn out to be like this. It wasn't a battle about who has the most chakra or the strongest technique. It was just Naito slamming everything with his fists. It was almost impossible to fight back. If I want to deal with him, I will have no choice but to use that move, but that technique will cost me a lot of chakra. Kaguya continued to flee, frowning, thinking about how to deal with Naito while running away. In the chasing battle with Naito, she was attacked by Naito's shock force more than once, and that power was also effective on her immortal body. Just like her all-killing Ushbones, if it's genuinely nailed to Naito's body, it would have definitely killed him, but that never came close to happening yet. However, the problem is that Naito managed to hit her, but she couldn't beat him just once. How is fighting like this? Kaguya was already a little dazed, and she didn't know to fight anymore. She could only use the power of the space to hide again and again. Crack! Once space was shattered again, Naito stepped forward, then looked at Kaguya, running away, and snorted. Playing as this has already annoyed Naito. Although he can keep this until Kaguya consumes all of her strength, he didn't know how much that would take. This is one of Kaguya's 6 dimensions, the ice world. The ground here was entirely made of ice, and it was continually repairing itself. There are 6 dimensions. In that case, Naito floated in the air and glanced at the frozen world with a sharp look in his eyes. Suddenly the chakra surged violently, and horrifying waves of killing intent poured out of his body. Ah! Naito's expression became severe. After clenching his fist, he crossed his hand against his chest, then he shouted, hammering both of his fists at the void. Boom! The 2 punches fell, and the entire dimension was shocked. Around Naito's fists, a terrifying black crack spread in all directions without any intention to stop and instantly reached the end of this ice world. Like a mirror, the entire dimension cracked and shattered with no way to be healed again. Finally, the entire ice world collapsed. In the magma space, Kaguya was standing there with an extremely alert expression. She was using her Bakugan the entire time to see everything around her. The moment the space cracks, she will immediately move to the next dimension. But at this moment, her expression suddenly changed, revealing a horrified expression. Impossible! That guy has destroyed the ice dimension. Kaguya was the one who created all the 6 dimensions, and once one is destroyed, she will undoubtedly know it. In the battle with Naito, her dimensions were damaged, but they were frequently being repaired. So unless they were hit by power on the same level as her creation powers, it would be challenging to be completely destroyed. After all, each of these dimensions was equivalent to a world. However, Naito actually destroyed one of her dimensions, proving that Naito might have already possessed the strongest power. Just when Kaguya's expression became so ugly, the space in front of her suddenly shattered. This time before he could even reach the magma dimension, Kaguya opened another space portal, and without any hesitation, she escaped. Silently, Kaguya appeared in the acid world, but at this time, she gritted her teeth, as she focused on her magma dimension. However, before she could see anything, she felt a buzz in her mind. The destruction of the magma dimension. At this moment, Kaguya was finally a little shocked. Destroying 2 dimensions in a row, for her, is equivalent to releasing 2 consecutive extended truth-seeking balls, which is simply incredible. Before Kaguya could even react, the void shattered again, and Naito stepped into the acid world. The acid world is destroyed. Desert world, destroyed. Gravity world was destroyed. Helplessly watching her 5 dimensions being destroyed one after another by Naito, Kaguya felt shocked. Although she can also destroy a world or even create one, she's not capable of this. Shattering 5 in a row is even out of her league. After destroying one world, Naito would rush to the next one, completely ignoring her. Finally, one final dimension was left. Kaguya in the air took a deep breath, then a touch of determination appeared in her eyes, and the Rinnegan in her forehead started surging a crazy amount of chakra. This is the end. There's no other way to do it, it is only to fight to the death. In her heart, she knew that even if she asked for mercy, Naito wouldn't let her go. He would certainly want the take her god tree fruit for himself, and she will never give it up. After all, it meant life itself to her. Besides, she was the ancestor of chakra, and she will never beg for mercy from anyone. Crack! Space shattered once again. Naito stepped in, then looked up at Kaguya in the sky faintly. Expansive. Truth-seeking ball. Kaguya's strength has been consumed too much, and it's almost reaching the limit. If she keeps this fight any longer, she won't be able to use this technique. Under the violent surging of her chakra, the truth-seeking ball began to form and grow larger. This is the change of chakra nature of the wind, thunder, water, fire, earth, yin, and yang. The ultimate truth-seeking ball is also Kaguya's ultimate technique, which contains the power of destroying the world and recreating it. The truth-seeking ball kept getting larger and wrapped Kaguya inside it, while she stared at Naito coldly. This technique has the power to destroy the world, and this gonna be the end. So, whom end it will be? After saying that, Kaguya disappeared inside the expansive truth-seeking ball. As it grew larger, signs of fragmentation gradually appeared in the space. Watching this scene, and hearing Kaguya's words, Naito couldn't help but smirk and looked up with absolute confidence. Yes, it will be your end. Facing the expansive truth-seeking ball, Naito didn't wait for it to destroy the dimension but gathered all of his strength for the last punch. At this moment, the world fell apart. At the collision, a dazzling light converged, filled the space, condensed into one point, and finally collapsed. Even in the Shinobi world, a bright white light appeared in the distant sky, like a star, bursting in the sky. The night was controlling the Shinobi world at that moment. However, the burst of this star illuminated almost the entire world. However, no one can appreciate this beautiful and shocking view because everyone was in genjutsu. Gradually the light faded away, and the sky turned dark. Inside the nothingness, the violent spatial energy raged here. Even a Six Paths user would quickly run out of power just trying to stand here, and finally, his body will tear apart. However, in this turbulent flow of void, there was an illusory figure floating. Despite the constant pressure of the space power, he was unscathed as if he has integrated into space. It was Naito. After destroying the expansive truth-seeking ball, Kaguya was crushed and failed to create a new world, so Naito fell into the void of nothingness. Naito was slowly moving in this void. Naito can blend his body into space without any harm, but if he wants to move in it, he must resist the power of the turbulence of the void. After all, the power of space here is completely disordered, and even techniques like the Flying Thunder God are ineffective here. Unless you can open a long-distance space channel, you can't just teleport in her. After moving forward for a while, Naito reached out with his hand and grasped the void. Whoosh! Suddenly, something weird appeared in his hand. It looked like strange fruit that even this void couldn't destroy. After it fell into Naito's hands, it began to struggle desperately, but there was no way to break free from Naito's hands. It's over. Naito looked at the fruit and murmured softly. His will suddenly fell, as he held it fiercely. Suddenly, the fruit stopped shaking. The tree god fruit, ha! Holding the fruit in his hand, Naito smiled happily. Many other dimensions and worlds could be seen from the crystal walls inside this chaotic and distorted void. The closest was the Shinobi world. However, even though it was the closest, moving to it inside this void was consuming a lot of Naito's strength. Consuming even more power than Naito used to destroy Kaguya's dimensions. Since I can't create a space channel, it's really troublesome, but I will have a lot of time later to study it. In the Shinobi world sky, his figure gradually took its form, and he finally returned to the Shinobi world. He then glanced at the god tree fruit in his hand and smiled slightly. Glancing at the Shinobi world below, Naito let go of the fruit, and it suspended naturally in the air. Then he used a one-handed seal on it. Infinite Tsukuyomi, release. Silently. The god tree's sturdy roots and stems withered one by one, and everyone fell back to the ground, opening their eyes in confusion. And the rays of the sun once again rose from the end of the world. The Fourth Shinobi World War was over, with Naito ending everything. Everyone was inside the Infinite Tsukuyomi's genjutsu, and they knew in their hearts that it was Naito who released them and saved the entire Shinobi world. Whether it is the Shinobi of the sand or the rock, those who have hated Naito, feared Naito, and even ordinary people in the Shinobi world turned to be reverencing Naito. Of course, Naito can destroy the Shinobi world with a wave of his hand, and the power he possesses is still terrifying, but Naito and Kaguya are different. Since the end of the Four War, he has hardly appeared in the Shinobi world. With that, Naito's name became more like a legend. And as time passed, not only Konoha but other major villages also built stone statues of Naito and enshrined them. Numerous years ago, there was a goddess called Otsutsuki Kaguya. Now, countless years later, Naito was also revered as a god. Not god of Shinobi, because he would still be regarded as a ninja. In the eyes of many people, Naito was no longer a ninja, but a true god. In a space parallel to the Shinobi world. This dimension was a sacred place similar to Mount Myoboku or Cave Ryuchi, but even more special. This dimension was created by Naito, so he and Kushina can live in it. However, Tsunade, Kanon, Hinata, Anko, and others occasionally come here too. Of course, this dimension wasn't huge. After all, Naito's power tends to destroy more than create. Although Kaguya's fruit was left behind after her death, he didn't eat it. Naito wasn't like Kaguya, even though he realizes that it contains a lot of power. He used this fruit for research purposes, and after he finished studying its mystery, he gave it to Kushina. Although the remaining power inside it isn't much, it was still enough to help Kushina step into the 6 paths level, but it seems that Kushina isn't able to reach, for some special reasons, Kaguya's level. Naito guessed that perhaps the reason was that Kaguya isn't from this world, and Kushina could only be regarded as Kaguya's offspring. And even if she ate the fruit of the god tree, it would be challenging to reach Kaguya's level. But this was enough. Kushina never cared about power. Today, although she's not as strong as Kaguya, time can't affect her body. Under the clear blue sky, Naito was lying on the grass. Naito, have you seen Kiko-chan? T/N, Kiko, happy child. Kushina looked extremely worried as she walked to Naito. Naito tilted his head slightly, looked at Kushina, then he smiled. Don't look for her, this time she isn't hiding, she ran to the Shinobi world. I didn't expect her to be able to open a portal channel that connects this dimension to the Shinobi world. She went to the Shinobi world. Kushina was startled, stared at Naito with wide eyes, and then said, why didn't you stop her? She's only 10 years old, what if she encounters some dangerous people? Ha ha ha. Naito sat up, took Kushina in her arms, and smiled. She inherited both my power and yours, who would be able to hurt her in the Shinobi world? That's not enough. She's still young, no matter how strong she is, they would still be able to trick her. Kushina stared at Naito, dissatisfied. Naito laughed and said helplessly, well, let me see where she is. As he said, Naito wiped the void in front of him, and a mirror appeared, and inside it, there was the Shinobi world. This place looks very fun. With a pair of pink ponytails, a cute little girl, who is about 10 years old, stood on the top of a cliff. Her big cute eyes blinked a few times as she looked at the bottom. Not only that, She isn't afraid of the height of the cliff, but she was even smiling, looking below at the valley, and then suddenly jumped down. Whoosh! She didn't fall, but floated in the air, flew for a while in this valley, then finally fell to the bottom. That's right, I'm sure I saw something here just now. Kiko circled around twice curiously as she found some weird things that looked like they have been used for experiments, displayed at the bottom of this valley. Suddenly, the rock wall on the side was slightly opened, and a figure emerged from it, with a pair of snake pupils. It was Orochimaru. He stared at the little girl in front of him, showing a slightly surprised expression. How did this little girl discover his secret place, and how did she get here? Looking up at the cliff, Orochimaru found this weird, but also felt a sense of eagerness to catch this girl and study her. So he walked toward Kiko. However, before Orochimaru could use any means to capture her, Kiko seemed to have sensed something, and suddenly turned around and saw Orochimaru. Ordinary people will almost be scared to death when they see Orochimaru, even if they are Jonin, they will be frightened just by a gaze from him, but this girl wasn't afraid. On the contrary, she blinked, with a curious expression. Hey, how did you come here? Orochimaru's mouth twitched slightly. This seems to be the question he should ask. He didn't know how this little girl appeared here and how she found him, but she doesn't look afraid of him, so he could tell that something was wrong here. However, the eagerness to catch her and study her was still there in his heart. It has been 10 years since the day Naito disappeared from the Shinobi world. And since he left, no one in this world can threaten Orochimaru's life anymore. It's not good to just break into someone else's house like this. Orochimaru showed a slightly wicked expression at Kiko. Is this your home? Kiko looked surprised. And just when Orochimaru was about to step forward to catch her, she suddenly showed a proud expression and said, "So from today on, this place is mine." After saying this, Kiko smirked, then took a punching stance. When Orochimaru heard her words, he wanted to laugh. But the moment he saw that smirk and stance, he suddenly felt that it was too familiar. As a result, he opened his Mangekyou Sharingan and looked at her. With one glance, Orochimaru was startled, and with every second, he was getting even more horrified. The power brewing inside her little fist is so familiar. Wait. Are you? Boom. Before Orochimaru could call out, Kiko's small fist struck the void in front of him, and it suddenly shattered like a mirror, and at the same time, a terrifying shock force hit Orochimaru's body. Even if Orochimaru used his power desperately, he wouldn't be able to block her small punch. His body flew out directly, hitting the rock wall with a bang, and forcibly bombarded it, leaving a big human-shaped hole behind. Although he didn't die directly, he still kept crushing deep into the rock formation, and he felt like crying. Orochimaru had many unfortunate encounters in his life. The first was the third Hokage sealing a part of his sound, the second being blown away by Naito, and the third was being punched by this little pink-haired little girl. You didn't even have to guess Kiko's identity. With such familiar movements and such familiar power, it would be a ghost if it weren't Naito's daughter. Even Orochimaru couldn't get up after taking this punch head-on. It seems a bit too much, I didn't expect him to be this weak. Standing outside, Kiko grabbed her hair and showed an embarrassed expression, saying, "No wonder, Dad said that people in this world are very weak." In Naito's dimension. On a piece of verdant green grass, Naito was lying there, looking at the mirror in front of him, and laughed for a long time. Even Kushina couldn't help but laugh with him. This is the first time I see Orochimaru acting so careless. He even observed her with his Mangekyou Sharingan. Why did he end up doing such a stupid thing? No way, Kiko's so cute, no one can suspect that she's that strong. He stopped laughing, but Naito had a smile on his face. She looked exactly like him in every way, punching Orochimaru with a fist, even her style was too similar to him. Although she's only 10 years old, Kiko, who has inherited both of her parents' power, is almost born at the level of the 6 paths, Hagoromo. But this girl has not been able to exert her full strength yet. Otherwise, Orochimaru wouldn't have just got bombarded. After laughing for a while, Kushina pushed Naito and said, "Aren't you going to get her back?" Naito shrugged helplessly and said, "I think it's good for her to go out and play. At her age, the two of us were completely independent. Kakashi has become a chunin at the age of 6. Kushina shook her head vigorously and said, "That's completely different." Naito said disapprovingly, "How is it different?" Kushina looked worried and said, "You don't understand, I mean, what if Kiko-chan inherited something else from me? What if she goes crazy and tears down the Shinobi world by accident?" Naito widened his eyes, looking at how Kushina acting so embarrassed. His expression was like saying, "Why are you embarrassed to say this?" Kushina blushed, clenched her fist, then threatened him, "Are you going or what?" I'll go. Sure enough, she must have inherited that too. Naito's mouth twitched, then banged the tip of his finger on Kushina's forehead as he stood up and stretched. Suddenly, Naito's expression changed, and looked below with a cold stare in his eyes, which made the dimension itself become a word of ice and snow. Feeling the sudden change in Naito's body, Kushina's expression instantly became serious, and said, "What's wrong?" "It's nothing, they're finally here." Naito stared at the void ahead with indifferent eyes and stepped directly into it. His entire body gradually faded, then disappeared altogether. After punching Orochimaru and finding out that he didn't die, Kiko sensed his vitality, and was surprised by how much power he had, so with a smirk, she decided to play more with her toy. However, just as she was about to walk over, the sky suddenly dimmed. Boom! The rocks in front of Kiko burst apart, and the cliffs cracked instantly, then collapsed, and rubble splashed everywhere. Upon noticing this, Kiko finally looked dignified. She blocked the rocks with her 2 little arms, then leaped backward, and jumped into the air. Hum! Silently, a black passage appeared at the cliff's location before, and 2 figures came out of it floating. This world is. They looked a bit similar to Kaguya. One of them was Otsutsuki Momoshiki, who was sitting surprised on Otsutsuki Kinshiki's shoulder. Kinshiki whispered, "Didn't Master Momoshiki open the passage by tracing that huge chakra?" Momoshiki glanced at the world, then his gaze fell on Kiko, who was floating in the air, and raised his brow slightly. "It's really a huge and wonderful chakra. It seems that there is no deviation in the space channel this time. Leave it to me, Momoshiki-sama." Kinshiki looked at Kiko coldly. "Okay." Momoshiki floated in the air, looking at Kinshiki rushing toward Kiko, then a red halo suddenly transformed into a chain and rolled toward Kiko. Kiko observed Momoshiki and Kinshiki the entire time, but she didn't look afraid, she was more curious. Just when the chain was about to fall on her, a figure suddenly flashed in, held her with one hand, and grasped the chain with the other. "Do you know how dangerous this is?" Naito held the chain with one hand, but instead of looking at Kinshiki and Momoshiki, he looked at Kiko in his arm and said helplessly. Kiko obediently leaned in Naito's arm, grinning, then she glanced at the other 2, "The 2 of them don't seem to be from this world, Dad. Of course, they're not. He then looked at her again, and Kiko helplessly opened a portal beside them. He then put her inside the passage and said, "Go find your mom." After the portal was closed, Naito calmly looked at Momoshiki and Kinshiki. The two were a little surprised by Naito's sudden appearance, so they didn't react until Naito sent Kiko away. Whoosh! Suddenly, the golden red chain in Naito's hand melted instantly, retracted to Kinshiki, and turned into a golden stick. "Momoshiki-sama, the chakra inside him seems to be even bigger." Momoshiki looked at Naito calmly. A trace of greed and desire flashed in Momoshiki's eyes, then said, "I want him. The chakra fruit that will be created out of him will certainly be delicious." Kinshiki heard Momoshiki's words and immediately rushed toward Naito extremely fast. Whoosh! Instantly, he came in front of Naito and then hit him fiercely with his golden raid stick. "It has been a long time since I fought." Looking at the club falling, Naito greeted him with a punch. Boom! The fist collided with the club, and a terrifying force burst out. Even though both of them were suspended in the air, it still caused the ground below to crack open. Crack! At the next moment, Kinshiki's expression suddenly changed, watching his club crack under Naito's punch. This crack spread instantly, and finally, the club shattered. Damn it! Kinshiki didn't expect Naito to be so powerful, and he secretly exclaimed, and when he wanted to fall back, Naito's second punch caught him. Before it even connects, the air was already trembling, and the space in front of him was even distorted. Boom! Kinshiki wanted to block, but couldn't resist Naito's power, and was blasted out. His body was instantly blasted to the ground that collapsed upon impact. Yes, this is good. I can't wait to have this chakra. Momoshiki, who was watching from the side, looked excited and flew directly toward Naito, ignoring that fatty who was blown away. Wood golden release. Watching the trees flying over, Naito suddenly remembered that this guy seemed to have the ability to absorb chakra, so he didn't know if he should use the shock force against him. Therefore, Naito gave it a test punch. Crack! The air suddenly shattered, as if an ice surface was collapsed. A bright white crack appeared, and at the same time, a shocking force blasted toward Momoshiki. Facing Naito's power, Momoshiki directly stretched his left hand, and a strange Rinnegan shined in his palm. Hum! Naito's shock force was completely absorbed under this buzzing sound, and then it was reflected back at him with more force. The space around it seemed to have distorted and even shown signs of fragmentation. Sure enough, Naito didn't look surprised. Since Kaguya was afraid of this guy, it shouldn't be surprising that his ability can restrain the power of the God Tree fruit. Facing the power of his shock, Naito stroked the space in front of him casually, and the shock wave instantly calmed down. Although it was reflected with much more power, it still belongs to the shock force, and Naito can easily control it. It's useless. Your ability doesn't work on me at all. Momoshiki looked at how Naito completely eliminated his reflection from existence, with a surprised expression, yet he still responded proudly. It looks like it. Naito nodded. Momoshiki showed a haughty look and said, but that only means that I need to absorb more chakra from you. With that, Momoshiki rushed toward Naito. Looking at Momoshiki flying over, Naito indifferently looked at him, and once again made a fist, and threw it at him. It's useless for you two, it doesn't matter if you, Momoshiki once again stretched his hand, ready to absorb Naito's attack, but this time, he couldn't suck anything. Hum. Naito's punch fell, and the air suddenly burst, and a white pillar of light slammed Momoshiki's body. Impossible. I couldn't absorb it. Momoshiki quickly crossed his arms in front of him and abruptly tried to resist this attack, but there was still a hint of a shock on his face. No. No. How can this? He didn't use any chakra. You've guessed right. But also too late. Naito looked at Momoshiki, with a smirk on his face. Even if he could absorb chakra, and his shock force, so what? With his physical strength alone, he can use the evening elephant. Moreover, Naito's evening elephants were way stronger than Guy's. It seems that you're a bit strong. If one punch won't kill you, so. Naito watched Momoshiki struggling to block his blow, and suddenly he smirked, made a fist, and threw another one. Naito didn't even bother to move. He just stood there and threw a second one. 2 steps. Boom. The barely standing Momoshiki, who blocked the first one, couldn't stop the second one, and he got directly blasted into the ground without even making a sound. Boom. Naito flew over, looking at the deep hole he created in the ground, then shook his head. So, he couldn't stop the second one. Naito, who was about to give him another one, shook his head when he saw him collapse there. As expected, there isn't an enemy in this world who he cannot defeat with one punch. If not, the second would be enough. Cough. Damn. Momoshiki flew out of the pit. His gazes at Naito were no longer arrogant, but instead, he was gritting his teeth with a furious look on his face. Someone like him, who traveled to the endless space, and absorbed a lot of people's chakra, has never been so embarrassed. Just after Momoshiki flew out, Kinshiki also crawled out of the other pit with a body full of scars. Naito didn't plan on giving these two a chance, but with a flash, he appeared in front of Momoshiki and punched him directly. Evening Elephant. However, this time, Kinshiki suddenly rushed at high speed and abruptly blocked Naito's punch. HolyOniiSama. I know. Watching Kinshiki blocking Naito's punch with his body, Momoshiki suddenly stretched his hand out with hesitation. Hum. Suddenly, Kinshiki twisted and then turned into a strange fruit, which looked very familiar to the fruit Kaguya left after she died. And without hesitation, Momoshiki swallowed it, and with a roar, the whole person suddenly changed. Huge energy suddenly surged violently. Momoshiki's body got bigger, and purple Rinnegan eyes appeared on his forehead, and on both his hands. Very well, at least it's a bit interesting now. Looking at Momoshiki, which seemed to have grown several times stronger instantly, there was no fear in Naito's eyes, but a fervent zeal. After the transformation, Momoshiki looked at Naito with evident touches of madness in his eyes. Then he suddenly extended his hands, then aimed both the Rinnegan eyes at Naito. With Rinnegan's eye in the center of his forehead staring at Naito too, the 3 eyes formed a line. San Magatama. The dazzling golden light suddenly converged in the sky, condensed into 3 dazzling Magatama, and then suddenly rotated, turned into a golden beam of light, then rushed to the sky flying toward Naito. Even far away, everyone could see a golden beam of light rising into the sky as if it meant to tear it. Looking at it, Naito didn't see like he had any intentions to evade it, but instead, he swung his fist to meet it. This move was huge, but it couldn't penetrate even space. It was just enough to twist it. The ability to absorb chakra's attacks is troubling, but apart from it, his active skills seem to be weak. Evening Elephant. 1 step. 2 steps. 3 steps. 4 steps. 5 steps. Facing Momoshiki's attack, Naito used the elephant evening again. Since Momoshiki could absorb the shock force, he had to rely on such physical techniques. Naito flashed in the sky 5 times in a row, and 5 white pillars of energy fell from the sky and finally gathered into one, colliding with the 3 Magatama. Boom! A loud thunderous roar emitted. If Naito's previous move caused the area nearby to tremble, this collision made the entire Shinobi realm roar and shake, as if it was about to collapse. Coincidentally, Konoha was holding the Hokage handover ceremony. Naruto was about to take over the Hokage hat from the 6th Hokage, Hatake Kakashi. Suddenly the sky trembled, and the hat fell to the ground. At this time, no one paid attention to the Hokage's hat. Everyone, including Naruto, looked far away with shocked expressions. Even though it was so far away, everyone could see it on the horizon, a terrifying white beam of light and a golden beam of light colliding crazily. Feeling the power of this horror, Kakashi, Naruto, and the others, almost simultaneously thought of the same name. Naito. Except for Naito, no one can burst out such terrifying power. It feels as if the entire Shinobi world is shaking from fear. Moreover, Naito seems to be fighting with someone. Many ninjas who have experienced the 4th Shinobi World War suddenly felt like crying, watching this horrifying yet familiar scene on the horizon. The 4th Shinobi World War had just ended. Why are these beasts fighting again? This time, it seems like they're gonna destroy the entire world. Wait. Didn't that war break 10 years ago? Even though it happened 10 years ago, everyone feels like it was yesterday. Because not a single day passed without someone mentioning it. It seems to have just happened. Back on the battlefield. Naito's evening elephant and Momoshiki's son Magatama were madly colliding in the sky. The two forces were constantly interwinding, making sizzling sounds. The Magatama's penetrating power was extremely strong, but it has never been able to break through Naito's air cannon. Finally, the white beam of light and the golden one shrank toward the middle, fused into one orb of light, then burst apart. After the two attacks converged and exploded, a wave mark spread instantly. Its rate wasn't fast, but whether it hit a rock, a tree, or a mountain, it cut into 2 halves. It seems as if a gigantic long sword swept sideways and turned the Shinobi world plain. Whether it's an ordinary civilian or a ninja, they all watched this scene dumbfoundedly. Of course, the most unlucky people were the Cloud Village, because it was placed on a mountain, so the entire village has been cut off. As for the Raikage, he just watched the energy wave approaching from his window helplessly. Damn it! Looking at his attack getting blocked by Naito, Momoshiki had a hideous expression. He didn't expect that Naito wouldn't use chakra, but only physical strength. He's powerful. Although he was very eager to absorb Naito's chakra, he knew at this time that if he continues, Naito will surely kill him. His ability is mainly focused on absorbing others' chakra, so the moment Naito decided to use physical strength, he was restrained. And without using his prominent ability, he wasn't strong. So, when the Sun Magatama was also blocked by Naito, he didn't hesitate, and a black portal instantly opened in front of him, then he entered it. Remember this. I will be back. Before leaving, he didn't forget to say this arrogantly. Initially, Naito had a bit of killing intent, but after this sentence and how he acted so arrogant, Naito couldn't just let him go and chased after him with one step. The black passage distorted and disappeared after Momoshiki went in, but Naito's hands suddenly turned illusory and grabbed its edges, then the space passage was suddenly torn apart again. However, Naito didn't get in directly. He hesitated for a moment after he saw what was behind. He still can't move freely inside the void, so after passing by and killing Momoshiki, he might not be able to return for a short time. However, Naito didn't worry about that at that moment. Both Kushina and Kiko can be said to be invincible in this world. Although Kiko is young and a bit reckless, Kushina is there, and she will take care of her. Seeing that the space channel seemed to be fading, the look in Naito's eye became sharp, and finally made up his mind and stepped in. When he entered, Momoshiki was already too far ahead, but he still saw him stepping in. That guy dared to chase me. Looking at Naito, who was chasing him from behind, he started at him behind coldly. Since Naito dared to come here and chase him, he didn't hesitate anymore. He became now more determined to absorb all of his chakra. After taking a deep breath, Momoshiki suddenly stopped and waved his hands. Whoosh! Naito was rushing toward Momoshiki, and suddenly a weird distortion appeared in front of him. The entire space passage suddenly split into two. Momoshiki's side didn't show any signs of change, while Naito's side began to collapse, and the turbulent flow of the void hit it hard. Even if you made it in here, it doesn't mean that you can travel inside, just give up. You gonna die in this turbulent void. Momoshiki stood there, stared at Naito coldly, then turned around, and waved his hand. A space portal appeared in front of him, and then he flew toward it. However, just when he was about to reach the portal, he heard a sudden emitting of a sound behind him, and the turbulent void seemed to have trembled. Siki. Hearing the voice, Momoshiki couldn't help but look back with a hint of shock. Momoshiki turned and saw Naito standing there in the center of the collapsing turbulent void, and he seemed to have a cold smug grin on his face, while a blood-red aura was surging from all over his body, then gathered around forming a blood-colored dragon. Ryu. Naito's voice sounded like a roar from hell. Instantly, his figure was wrapped inside the blood-colored blue dragon as he rushed toward Momoshiki. Whoosh! The blood-colored blue dragon flew rampant in the space channel that was on the verge of collapsing, and even the turbulent flow of the void couldn't stop it. Even the chaotic distortion of the space was all blown away abruptly under the impact. This is impossible. He looked in disbelief. Even Momoshiki can only open the space channel and never managed to resist the void's turbulent flow. At that moment, Momoshiki felt that even if he's twice as strong as he was now, he wouldn't be able to do it. However, Naito unexpectedly rushed into the void's turbulent flow and even caused the power of the chaos to fade by force. This kind of power is simply incredible. Horrified, Momoshiki tried to get into the space portal, but he suddenly heard one last shout. Yagai! Boom! The scarlet blue dragon broke through the turbulent flow of the void, slammed Momoshiki's body, forcibly smashed the space gate completely, and destroyed the passage, then flew into the endless void. Momoshiki's body made a cracking sound with an evident look of horror in his eyes. Finally, along the way, he shattered inside the turbulent flow of the void. Naruto Arc, The End, to be continued. That's it for this video, guy. Hope you like the video. Like, share and subscribe the channel. Also tell me your recommendations in the comment section down below. Thanks for watching.